Hey everybody, so we are going to be talking about how to find percents of a number just mentally using mental math. This is a really important life skill because when you are finding percents of a number for the rest of your life, you don't always want to have to pull out something to write on and set up a proportion and find the percent. You just want to be able to do it in your head, and this is how most adults find percents actually. So the way this worksheet works is these are going to be the numbers that we're finding the percents of, and these are the different percents that we're going to be finding. And there's a trick for each of them. So for example, the first thing that we're going to do is learn the trick for 10%. And when we are finding 10% of a number, we are thinking of how many times 10 fits into 100. 10 times 10 equals 100. It fits in 10 times. So if we want to find 10% of something, we basically have to do the opposite. We have to divide it by 10. But there's an easy way to divide any number you want by 10, and that's to do one swoop to the left. It's kind of like when we're doing dip and we do two swoops to the left. It's just one swoop for the left, to the left for 10%. So let's try finding 10% of 20. So we could do 20 divided by 10. We know how to do that, but let's pretend we forgot how to do 20 divided by 10 real quick. You put the period at the end, like at the end of the sentence. You do one swoop in, and you get 2.0 or 2. So 10% of 20 is 2. Pause the video and see if you could find 10% of 80, 10% of 100, 10% of 40, and 10% of 8. Then unpause when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you found all of these already. So if I do 80 divided by 10, I get 8. So 10% of 80 is 8. And for the next one, I'm actually going to do my swoop trick instead. Period at the end of the sentence, one swoop in, 10.0 or 10. 10% of 100 is 10. For the next one, I'm going to try the divided by 10 because I could do either strategy. 40 divided by 10 is 4. 10% of 40 is 4. And then for 8, that one's not as easy to divide by 10. So I'm really going to want to use the swoop strategy here. Period at the end of the sentence, one swoop in, and I get 0.8. 10% of 8 is 0.8. So basically, these numbers all fit into the original number 10 times. And that's what makes it 10% of that number. All right, now we're going to do 25%. We know that 25% is the same thing as 1/4. And we're going to use that knowledge to help us find 25% easily. 25 fits into 100 10 times. I'm sorry, that's not right. 25 fits into 100 4 times. So 25 times 4 is equal to 100 because 25% is equal to 1/4. So to find 25% of something, we go backwards. We're going to be dividing it by 4. You can't do any swoops when you're dividing it by 4. That only works for like 10, 100, 1,000. So to divide by 4, you just have to divide by 4. So 20 divided by 4 is 5. 25% of 20 is 5. Go ahead and finish the rest of this column. Divide each number by 4. Pause the video and unpause it when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you found all those numbers. 80 divided by 4 is 20. 100 divided by 4 is 25. 40 divided by 4 is 10. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 25% of each of these numbers are the numbers that we see in this column. And that is a trick you are welcome to use on any test, quiz, or homework. If I ask you to find 25% of something, you don't have to set up a proportion. You could use this trick, divided by 4. All right, next example is 50%. So 50% makes me think of 1/2. And it's also connected with 2 because 50 times 2 equals 100. 50 fits into 100 twice. So to find 50% of something, we're finding half of it. Or in other words, we're dividing it by 2. And that's a mental math trick you could use. You do not need to write out a proportion if you remember that you could just divide the number by 2 to get 50%. So for example, 20 divided by 2 is 10. So 50% of 20 is 10. Go ahead and pause the video and finish the rest of the column. All right, hopefully you're ready to go over it. 80 divided by 2 gives us 40. 50% of 80 is 40. 100 divided by 2 gives us 50. 40 divided by 2 gives us 20. And 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. So 50% should always just be half of the number. All right, I'm going to introduce a little bit of a more complicated one this time. So using the same pattern that we've done before, we can't just do 75 times something equals 100. It actually ends up not going in evenly and being a whole number. So we have to use a different strategy instead, and that's fine. For 75%, we are thinking of the fact that 75% relates to 3/4. And our trick here is going to be to find 1/4 of the number and then multiply by 3. That's going to get us 3/4. And lucky for us, we have already found 1/4 of the number in the 25% column. So what we can actually do is take our answer for 25% and simply multiply it by 3. So starting with 20, 75% of 20, I'm going to be taking 1/4 of it. I already found 25%, it's 5. And I'm just going to be multiplying that by 3. 5 times 3 gives me 15. So 75% of 20 is 15. What if I hadn't already found 25% though? So for 80, I'm going to pretend that I don't know that it's 20 for 25%. I'm going to pretend that on a test, it just asked me for 75% and I had to start from scratch. The first thing I would do is divide it by 4. 80 divided by 4 will tell us what 25% of it is. It'll tell us what 1/4 of it is, and that's 20. So 20 is 25% of our original number 80. And then I just have to take that answer and multiply it times 3. 20 times 3 is 60. So 60 is 75% of 80. And that's how you could do it if it wasn't given to you. But for the rest of this worksheet, go ahead and use this 25% column that we already found. So in a moment, you're going to pause the video and you're going to find the 75% column by taking 25% for each of these numbers and just multiplying it times 3. So you're taking 1/4 and multiplying it by 3 to get 3/4, which is 75%. Pause the video and unpause when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you're ready. So for 100%, I'm going to erase some of these so you could see what I'm doing more easily. That was too much. Okay. So for 100, I'm going to take 25 and multiply it times 3, and that's 75. So 75 is 75% of 100. Now I'm going to do the next one. For 40, I'm going to take 25% and multiply it by 3. 10 times 3 is 30. 30 is 75% of 40. For my last one, 8, I'm going to take 2, which is 25%, and multiply it by 3 again. That is 6. 6 is 75% of 8. 75% is definitely a harder one than 10% or 25% or 50%, but now you know how to do it at least. One last thing I want to show you before we leave this section is the answers to problem 3. Since the whole in problem 3 was 100, each of the percent answers we found matched with the percent they were asking about. So 10% of 100 is 10, 25% of 100 is 25, 50% of 100 is 50, 75% of 100 is 75, because percents are out of 100. So if 100 is your whole, it's just going to be the exact same number. All right, going to get rid of some of those markings, and now we're going to do the bottom half of the page. So some of these are going to repeat. The first one is 10%. We already learned that to find 10% of something, we're going to divide it by 10, or in other words, do one swoop to the left. It's the same as the column above it. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do all of these new wholes as 10%. Unpause it when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you're ready to go over it. So an example of what I'm doing here is either just dividing it by 10 mentally or putting the decimal at the end, like a period at the end of the sentence, and swooping 1 in. So this would be 1.0, which is just 1. The next one would be 0.7 after swooping once. Next one would be 1.2 after swooping once. Problem 9 is 3 after swooping once. Problem 10 is 10. And we know that. We've already learned that if your whole is 100, then the number is just going to match whatever percent you were finding. All right, now 20%. This is a new one. So 20% reminds me of 1/5. 1/5 is equal to 20%. And that matches because 20 times 5 is equal to 100. There's actually 2 different ways you could find this one, and it just kind of depends which way you want to do it. So one trick would be to divide the number by 5, because that would get you 1/5, and that's 20%. The other way to do it is to take whatever you got from 10% and multiply it by 2. And that's actually the one that I would say more adults use. So if you are dining out with your parents at a restaurant and they're calculating the tip, a lot of parents start by finding 10% of the number and then doubling it. So 10% of the final bill times 2 is often what your parents might use for the tip. So you could use either method. For 10, problem 6, I could either do 10 divided by 5, which is 2, or I could take my answer for 10%, which is 1, multiply that times 2, and get the answer of 2. Same answer, either way works. So basically this means that if your bill was $10, a lot of people might leave $2 as a tip because that's 20% of it. For the next one, I'm actually just going to stick with the strategy of 10% times 2. So I'm going to take 0.7 and I'm going to multiply it times 2. That might take some scratch work, or you might even have to do that step on a calculator. If it's easy for you to just do 0.7 plus 0.7, you could do that. However you get it though, the answer is going to be 1.4. So on a $7 bill, a lot of people will give $1.40 for the tip because that's 20%. It's okay to use calculators, even though this is called mental math, if you're just doing it for like one of those mini steps. The point of mental math is really just so you don't have to do a proportion. That like this is something you could quickly type into your phone if you were out and you're trying to like do a tip or a discount. That's the point of mental math. All right, so you guys are going to do the 20% for the remaining 3. I would personally recommend taking the 10% answer and multiplying it by 2. Your choice though, you could divide the number by 5 instead and get the same thing. Pause the video, unpause when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you are ready. So I'm just going to stick with the strategy of 10% times 2. So 1.2 times 2 is 2.4. 3 times 2 is 6. 10 times 2 is 20. And that matches because our whole was 100. So 20% should match with the answer. 20 is 20% of 100. So maybe the next time you guys are out with your parents at a restaurant, you could show them how to find the tip. So you take the number and you find 10% of it by doing one swoop over. So that's 10%. And then you multiply that times 2, and that's a 20% tip. All right, 50%. We know this one. The trick was divide by 2. Go ahead and pause the video and find 50% of all of these numbers. Unpause it when you're ready. All right, so all I'm doing is dividing the numbers by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 100 divided by 2 is 50, which makes sense because for 100, it should match the percent. All right. Look at this last one, 100%. Think about how many times 100 fits into 100. You would do 100 times 1 to get 100. So what that actually means is since we would be dividing the number by 1 here, it's just itself. It's whatever we have written in the whole column, or in other words, itself, that will be the answer for 100%. So for example, 100% of 10 is 10. All right, pause and finish. Okay, hopefully you're ready to check. So 100% of 7 is 7, 100% of 12 is 12, 100% of 30 is 30, 100% of 100 is 100. And again, it should match. So these are just a set of skills that are going to make your life easier. And this is something that you will probably be using in your life as an adult quite frequently. So try to internalize these, try to learn these, try to use these on our homework and tests, because you also get out of showing work. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I think I might have gotten caught off there, but I was just saying, hope the rest of your day is good. Thank you.